Thank you, Madam Speaker, for this opportunity. Having been given your leave to comment on this piece of legislation that is undergoing its second reading, shortly entitled Criminal Record Rehabilitation of Offenders Amendment Bill 2023. Madam Speaker, this, of course, yeah, okay. So I want to say that I won't really be long, and I want to use the opportunity to commend those who have gone before, especially the mover of the bill, the Prime Minister, and Minister of Health, and also the seconder, that is member for constituency number 4, and all others who have contributed on this side and on the other side for bringing information to the people of this country about what we are seeking to do as a government at this stage in our development, when again we are asked to present proper legislation that would deal for the development of our country, especially dealing with how we will develop our people in moving forward, especially, I would say, our young people. I want to make the point further that this is important. This piece of legislation is important. As I drove from my village of St. Paul's to come here earlier, a number of radios were playing. People are listening. And people are listening because of the subject matter that is before us in the Parliament today. And so I want to commend again the decision that was taken by our cabinet to bring this piece of legislation to the Parliament, even though we are on a road that still will take us much further from where we are today. Because this is not the end. In fact, I don't even know if we're in the middle of the road. Because when I think of how far we have come, considering that it was just back in 2012, in the Summit of the Americas meeting back in 2012, held between the 14th and 15th of April, the leaders of the Americas, including at that time President Obama, we sat in Cartagena in Colombia. We were the guests of President Juan Manuel Santos, who was leading the summit. And there was a critical item on the agenda, which was, how do we treat the matter of drugs, narcotics and non-narcotics, including, of course, marijuana, or, as we are saying today, cannabis or ganja. How do we treat this at this time of the development of the Americas? How do we treat this issue, which had become for everybody a social issue in the Americas, but which over the years was treated mainly as a criminal matter? And so the presidents of Latin America and Central America and us prime ministers from the Caribbean at that time were part of that summit, which said that we needed to do something different. In fact, when we left that meeting, the command was given for all studies which had been done, all research that had been done about these drugs, be revealed and looked at the second time and see if the only way to deal with offenders was to have them incarcerated, have them shut up, have them placed into asylums, etc., 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 because of the effects that we were seeing on our people in terms of the hard drugs and the not so hard drugs. So from 2012 to 2022, 10 years, it's interesting to know that President Biden, who at that time was, I'm sure, very high in the Congress in some place. He was vice president under with Obama, yeah. Vice president, exactly, vice president. But it's very interesting to see that within a 10-year span, we have really responded to that call that was made in 2012. Begin to look at this in a different way. And so I'm very pleased to be here in this parliament to lend support to what this administration, this parliament is seeking to do, which really started several years ago. Because the very piece of legislation that we are amending today was in fact passed in 2014. It is number 14 of 2014. And at that time, it was the Criminal Records Rehabilitation of Offenders Act. Now we are amending in this parliament an improvement on that act to ensure that we as a responsible government and a parliament respond to what is happening around us in this world on the matter of drugs, the use, abuse of cannabis, ganja, marijuana, whatever you want to call it. And so I really believe that this debate is timely. The amendment to that bill at that time spoke of the need, if I'm not mistaken, for the court to impose an offense, a fine or a term. But what we are seeing here today is going a little further, because we look at Section 3 of this bill, which is amending Section 4 of the Parent Act. And it is basically down to C. I want to quote C. Who is convicted under the Drugs Prevention and Abatement of the Misuse and Abuse of Drugs Act, Chapter 9, of an offense. And it named those who were involved in the cultivation of small amounts of cannabis plants, not exceeding 5 cannabis plants, and involving the cultivation of cannabis plant, and the sentence imposed was imprisonment for a term not exceeding 3 years. As you've heard, especially from the member for number 7 earlier, that this was, of course, part and parcel of the movement forward to improve the legislation and to further decriminalize the use of small amounts of marijuana, of cannabis. I think one of the contributors to the bill mentioned, member for number 9, Nevis 9, mentioned that why 3 years as specified here. And we say 3 years because if you were to speak to the police, and if you look at the court records, this was the sentence that was being given to most of the offenders convicted at that particular time. And that is why we're going back to those who would have had 3 years. But those who might have had 5 years, as was questioned by member for number 9, the existing legislation, and I believe the legislation that would have been passed after, it spoke of the possibility of applying to the court to have that record expunged if it was more than 3 years. So it is still possible, but with an application to the court.
People can't afford lawyers to apply to the court.
Well, pro bono.
They get they're getting a better legal aid just now.
Yes, and we can have the legal aid clinic functioning in that particular matter. Right. So, and I believe, therefore, that the limit of 3 years, as mentioned here, as the maximum that would have been imposed, that is really not the end in all. It can go, oh, sorry about that. It can go much further. And as I said, if it is beyond 3 years, then the application can be made. You see, this is a very complex matter. And I want to also commend the members of the Cannabis Commission who responded as part of their public duties to help to bring some solution to the ongoing issue. I want to thank the participants who were also part of the Cannabis Authority, because this is going to continue as well. And so I want to commend, of course, previous government for putting these in place, but remembering that there have been several developments over the years, and maybe it could have been more dramatic, but we believe that as the society moves and changes from one understanding of the issue to the next, as I said, it was 10 years ago in Colombia that we as leaders of the Americas took that decision. And the country which was harshest in dealing with this issue was the United States. But 10 years after, President Biden is doing exactly what we said then should be done. Look at the issue, not just as a criminal issue, but look at it in terms of its potential, in terms of its enterprise in a legal way. Let us look at how we can treat offenders differently, and how those whose records might have been blurred, how now we can, in a second look, deal with that, remove the criminality from it. And so today, this parliament is doing exactly that. I want to say finally that there will be more amendments to the main legislation that speaks to drugs, the abuse of drugs, including cannabis, as a serious offense. But we want to make sure that when we would have done all of the revisiting, we would have prepared our people properly. One recognizes that a few years ago, maybe last year, we set up the structure and framework for medicinal marijuana, medicinal cannabis. We set it up. We hope that those who have been cultivators over the years, not those who have sniffed and tested, but those who have, because they tested, they said, but those who have been cultivated for commercial reasons, those who want to do the medicinal enterprise part of this industry, we want to thank those who have been able to make their contribution in that regard. But there's more to be done. I know the member for the senator, minister, mentioned Amsterdam. There's an Amsterdam in St. Paul's. There is an Amsterdam in St. Paul's. There is a Baghdad in Sadler's. Baghdad. Baghdad Club exists in Sadler's. So these are people, I am sure, who are listening to this debate and would want to know when is it going to be so freed up legally that they can be treated not as criminals, but as those who, whether recreational or other purposes, get engaged in such activity. But the warning also has been made. We have to make sure that there's proper education. The senator minister spoke of her experience in the classroom. Students who are listening to this debate and who are in the high schools and the primary schools must not misinterpret what it is that we are doing today. We are not saying to them that they can go to school and smoke and blow smoke in people's face and all kinds of things like that. No, that's not what we are saying. We are saying that we want to treat those who had been on the law judged to be criminals, that we decriminalize the notion, and as a result of them, simply see them as those who would have had an opportunity to use this cannabis and were violating the laws at that time. And now, of course, such is a different thinking in our country. I remember going on radio stations in 2012 making reference to this same point after coming back from the summit. Because people were then saying, oh, you need to free up the thing and you can't be locking up people. And I said, the time is going to come, take it easy. Because we had already taken that position that we will move in a different direction. Let us therefore ensure that we have a proper education being given to our citizens with regard to the possible abuse of cannabis and other drugs. Let no one think that the effects on the brain will disappear. I'm a medical doctor. I have seen patients quite normal well, as persons, I would say quite normal. But one little sniff unmasked what was a latent case of schizophrenia. They go mad. One sniff.
Sniff? Which part are you talking about?
Not sniff. Smoke of a spliff. Yes. Unmask latent schizophrenia and can affect them for life. So I guess several drugs can do that. But I'm just saying that it's not for everybody. And that is why the laws are in existence to control the use and the exposure, especially to our children. The young men who are on the streets, who claim they have no employment opportunities, and they dabble in that all the time. We want to make sure that they understand this cannot be sustained. There has to be some other form of recreation if we are going to expect them to advance themselves and perform other tasks and other duties and meet other challenges in life. So it is a complex issue. And again, I commend this parliament, I commend the government for bringing this at this time, so that although we are doing the incremental changes, I think the pace at which it is going is good, because it gives time for proper education and understanding. Because those who may think that it is okay to take it for your tea, for your cold, I have a cold, I want to know if I should take some. Because they said it's good for cold. And seriously, I was told you need to take some tea. But that's the whole point. We have to make sure that we understand. We're arranging some?
Yes.
For lunch? Okay. We have to make sure that we understand that this substance can be abused, and therefore it is not for everybody. May it please you, Madam Speaker.